Hey, folks. Happy New Year, nearly. Nearly there. We're nearly at the end of Luke as well. We're in Luke chapter 23 today on today's episode of the Bible. Wait, what?
What?
I love it when you do that. I'm sitting down with Adrian again, as we have been all this week's episodes. And we're actually doing 7 episodes this week rather than the usual 5 because we wanted to round out the Gospel of Luke. And we've got 2 to go. We've got this chapter is Jesus' trial, his crucifixion, and that's pretty much it. And then resurrection will be in tomorrow's episode, won't it? Yeah. So good to have you, Adrian. Take us away. Let's talk about the trial and the crucifixion, etc.
We've moved from the Jewish side of the trial to the Roman legal side.
Yep.
So the spiritual religious people said, well, you're really bad. We don't like you, but we can't do anything about it legally.
That's right. Yeah, that's worth mentioning for our listeners that technically under Roman law they couldn't do a crucifix. They couldn't kill Jesus because they didn't have authority to do that because they were under Roman occupation, weren't they? So if they were going to get a execution across the line, they had to do it through Roman authorities.
And again, you got the Romans want to keep the Jewish leaders on side and all those other little political things going underneath. So let's see how they try to work it out. So it starts with Jesus' indictment before Pilate. Pilate says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Which is a thing. He says, "Yep."
Yep.
Well, it is as you say.
Yep, that's right. Basically what he says. Yep, that's me.
And he was, although his kingdom's not of this world, he is now going to the cross as Jesus to be condemned, be crucified. He is in that role of a king.
And he knows he's going to, just like in the last chapter, he knew that he would have to claim to acknowledge that he was the Son of God in order to be found guilty of a capital crime by the Jews. He knows that claiming to be the Son of God is not necessarily going to, a Jewish faith thing is not going to get him crucified by the Romans. So he has to and is willing to acknowledge his kingship here. Ironically, Pilate doesn't even really see a problem with that because he doesn't see it as a threat. Yeah. That's the difference. He doesn't see it as a threat to Roman rule.
Because he replies, "I find no guilt in this man.
I'm not guilty." Because, he claims, but then they turn around and say, anyone who claims to be a king is an enemy of Caesar. Yeah. And that kind of forces Pilate's hand to some degree.
Yeah, they come back, but he stirs up the people, blah, blah, blah,
that's
blah.
right. Yeah. He's inciting an insurrection is basically what they're accusing him of.
It's it's commonly, no matter what he does, we'll say it's wrong.
Oh, totally.
In some way
to get our point across.
To get someone to say, okay, we'll say is bad just to get you off our back type thing.
That's right. And that's what they were clearly doing. They had no problems with making false accusations to get it across the line with the Romans, to get the Romans on Pilate to crucify him.
I think they've forgotten the 9th commandment about not bearing false witness.
Oh yes, they ignored that one many times when it came to Jesus, didn't they?
Yep. So then you get sent to Herod.
Yep. Herod was in town. This is Herod Antipas, not Herod. This is the Herod the Great's son. Herod the Great was around at the time of Jesus' birth. This is his son, Herod Antipas from Galilee. Yep.
And because Jesus was from Galilee and all those little tricky legal things in there, we can prosecute you because you lived in that town.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
if you lived in another town,
then you wouldn't be in your jurisdiction. Yeah. And this is Pilate. I mean, the alleged crime has been committed in Jerusalem, but clearly Pilate's trying to get out of this. Whether he's trying to get out, I think the Christian church has largely whitewashed Pilate, but history is now showing that he's a pretty ruthless dude. But he's clearly afraid of riot. So if he can possibly get out of this and pin it on Herod, he will. So he goes, he's a Galilean. Okay, over to you, Herod. You take care of this situation.
Reminds me of some of the American movies where they're chasing the baddies, but baddies just got to get across the
border,
even the jurisdiction, city lines.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
And because the way they set up the police and stuff, they haven't got authority.
The sheriffs can't change outside the county. It's like that here. Yeah.
So
he sends him to Herod, who doesn't even try the case. He's just more intrigued by, this guy's the one who's caused me all this heartache.
Well, it seems that Herod wanted to see a show.
He wanted to see a show.
Yeah, as lots of people do. In John 6, people just hanging around for the food.
Yep, exactly.
So Herod was in there saying, I wonder what I've got to see out of this.
Yeah, I wonder if I get this. I've heard all about him. Let's see him do one of those miracles he's been talking about. But it's just purely out of, like you say, a sense of wanting to see a show.
Jesus didn't do miracles like that. Jesus did miracles to show people who he was.
He did miracles to show who he was, to show that the kingdom of God has come. Like when John the Baptist says, "Are you the one?" He says, "Go back and tell John what you've seen. The blind hear, the lame walk, the dead raised, the good news is preached to the poor." Directly quoting from the Old Testament is what the Messiah would do. Jesus did miracles to show who he was. Yep.
Was here apparently he just said nothing.
No, this one he just goes, no. Yep. Which once again shows absolute control of mastery of the situation.
Not going to say nothing.
Yep.
They got him upset, so then they started treating him with contempt and mocking him and dressed him with a gorgeous robe. Someone suggested it was one of Herod's throw-offs.
Could well have been.
Because Herod was the big...
Yeah.
Herod was the king or the ruler, so they put a second-hand kingly robe on him.
Yeah, well, it has to be. It says a royal robe. I've never thought about it, but yes, it must have been one of Herod's cloaks. Yeah, bring him one of my cloaks.
Yeah, we'll make fun of him, and then because they're making fun of him.
They are. They're mocking him.
Yeah, and then they send him back to Pilate. But Herod and Pilate got friends that day, which is interesting.
Which is fascinating.
Because they had something common.
A common dislike for Jesus. Yes, that's right. Exactly.
And it says they were enemies of each other before that. But it's just funny how life works. Doesn't it?
Political rivals suddenly became allies.
Yeah. Probably for political purposes, like we see happening.
Oh, and we see that in church life too. Sometimes people ally, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. That's what's going on here.
The friend of my friend is my enemy.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Yeah. However it works,
Yeah.
The trouble is Pilate's now got to make a ruling, doesn't he?
He does now. He's stuck. He has to make a ruling because the leading chief priests are saying, you have to do this. If you don't do this, you're no friend of Caesar.
Yep. This one hasn't got about his Pilate's wife, has it? That's in a
No, I think that might be Mark's gospel.
Yeah. And he said, but he said, Herod sent him back to us and there's nothing deserving death. What's he done? And they said, I'll punish him and let him go.
Yep.
And they said, no, you can't do this. Can't do that. And there's a little bit in brackets there, but then they want a robber and a murderer released and Jesus.
Yep. They want an insurrectionist released. Yep.
And don't we see in this world sometimes baddies get out of jail and...
Yep. And sometimes the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper.
There's a case in Britain recently where someone posted a meme and I think they got sent to jail for 9 months. Someone was involved in a murder and got 6 months in jail.
Yeah, our justice system is not perfect.
It's all twisted and stuff. And I think it's going to get worse as the world gets worse.
As human selfishness gets in the way of justice,
as we move further away from God. Because we drift in and out of our relationship and closest to God.
Yeah, as societies do as well, and values and so on and so forth.
As Israel did, so expected to
as
happen.
Israel did multiple times.
Yeah.
Read the book of Judges. Yep, exactly.
And then Pilate wants to release him. They start jumping up and down, crucify him. And they said, what evil has he done, says Pilate. And they'll probably come back and say, nothing, but we want him dead.
Yep.
Anyway, it's a noisy wheel type thing.
Yes.
Pilate didn't want another insurrection or
Pilate
anything
did
like
not,
that.
and that was a very common thing. In fact, Pilate did not live in Jerusalem. Pilate lived in Caesarea by the beach.
Okay.
He only went to Jerusalem. No one wanted to go to Jerusalem. It was out of the way. I mean, why would you, if you could live on the Mediterranean coastline or up in the hills and you're a Roman, you live by the opulent palace that Pilate had down by the Mediterranean coastline. He went to Jerusalem only to put down insurrection, and Passover was one of those big times.
Because everyone's there.
Everyone's gathered. Yeah. It's a hotbed of emotion and feeling. Jesus refers to the other time. We have it from I think it's Josephus, about a time when it was that Jesus, I think he refers to it, but there was a riot. What had happened is it wasn't even a riot. There were crowds gathering on the temple forecourts, and Pilate ordered a whole bunch of Roman soldiers to disguise themselves as Jews, and they walked through the crowd and just without any what's the word I'm after? Like not picking out certain people, just randomly started pulling out their swords and killing people. They slayed men, women, and children on the court. So Pilate was ruthless, but he was under no misconceptions that if he did not stop the riots in Israel among the Jews, he was not going to be in Caesar's good books.
Okay.
So that's all the background that's going on here. And so when the crowds are starting to rise and say crucify him, he's thinking, I can't have another riot. I've got to put this to bed.
So it's the I'll do this wrong thing to
prevent
something bad coming to me.
Yeah, exactly what he was doing. Yeah, basically he chose his own well-being over Jesus. Yeah.
Which we do something.
Which we do.
We often do, don't we?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that the one that they release, his name is Barabbas, which just means son of the father.
Does it?
Yeah, son, Abba, father.
Okay.
Barabbas.
Never heard that one before.
No, so if you think about the interesting thing there, it's that one son of the Father sacrificed himself for another son of the Father.
Okay.
So we are Barabbas in this story.
Yes. And again, just the irony of that.
Oh yeah, it's like God orchestrated that whole thing to say, I'm going to use this story to tell a story. You know?
Back before creation, God was thinking, how can I have a bit of fun there?
Yeah,
I know.
I know what I'll do. I'll have one of my sons stand in the gap for another representative son, and that's what Luke's trying to get, is that we are all the insurrectionists. We are the ones, and we missed our cross, and Jesus took our cross. Yeah.
And so he said, all right, he released them. Pilate pronounced sentence.
Yep. And then they let him away.
Exactly as God had
intended. Yep, that's right.
Now we have the crucifixion, which goes on for 24 verses or something. But just underneath the crucifixion is a lot of what happened, and there's a question of what happened on the cross. How did the crucifixion actually result in salvation? There's a who was for.
Yep.
And then
how does atonement work?
and how do we actually get that applied to ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. The atonement debates.
Yeah. And of course, it's one of the first things we looked at during the years. There's eight things in there. But I was thinking it was a chicken and egg thing, but it's actually three things that you're juggling. And your thoughts on this one are going to affect your thoughts on that one, which are thinking, okay, but if I think that and that, I can't think this.
It's incredibly complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's all under just a couple of verses where Jesus gets crucified. And yet, for 2,000 years, theologians have wrestled with how the crucifixion does what it does. And I think I've come to the realization I can learn lots of things, but once again, I think we shouldn't just accept it. We should study it and research it, but all the while hold it with a humility and a wonder to think that, my goodness, this is beyond my understanding, that the Son of God would surrender his life for me. Yeah, I mean, from a human voice, or not human voice, from human thinking, how can someone dying somehow mean I can get into heaven? How's a human dying mean that sin, whatever sin is, gets forgiven? Yep,
that's right. How does that change me?
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's just so much depth and complexity in it.
So there's got to be more going on than just a legal transaction. And that's part of it. That's the penal substitutionary atonement perspective. That there's got to be something there. There's a legal transaction where I have been justified, called righteous because Jesus has paid a price for me. That's PSA, penal substitutionary atonement. And yet, if you only limit it to that, a person can walk out of a courtroom innocent, or I should say not guilty, and go and recommit a crime. So it has done that, but it's done more than that. Somehow it's actually changed. Jesus' death has a power to fundamentally alter my nature, which is not a legal thing. That's a spiritual thing.
Spiritual thing.
Somehow it's killed the power of sin in me, which is far greater than just a legal transaction where the Father says, okay, you're right now. Jesus says to the woman, I don't condemn you, go and sin no more. That's just not like a suggestion. There's something in what Jesus does on the cross that actually empowers us to sin no more. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. All, like you say, contained in the matter of a few verses in the Gospels. Incredible.
Someone said Christians aren't sinless, but they should sin less.
I like that one. Yeah.
And when we're glorified, we won't sin anymore.
That's right.
Forget, is it Augustine? There's 5 states of men. There's able to sin. It wasn't Augustine.
It sounds like something that someone like Augustine or one of the early church fathers would have said.
But able to sin and able to choose to sin. One of those things where you get the stages of, and it's quite interesting, the different stages, how they see it that we go through of, and
working towards the incapable of sinning in the resurrection.
When in heaven, we just won't sin.
Yeah, that's right. It's remarkable to me. Yeah, all contained in the fact that Jesus gave his life for me.
Yeah. And he only gave it for you because he decided to create you in the first place, because he decided to create a universe in the first place.
Yep. Because he loved us. Yep. Beautiful. So messes with our head, doesn't it?
Okay, so what are we going to discuss for the next 15 years and not resolve any of it?
No, that's right. We can continue to throw it around and just be amazed at the massive grace of God.
But I think it helps people if they appreciate how big this thing is. Some people like to think they understand everything, especially when we're new.
Yeah. And it's not that, understanding Jesus died for your sins, that's a great starting point.
Yep.
I don't want to dismiss that, but understand it's much richer and deeper than that. And come to it with a humility, knowing that you can mine the depths of the crucifixion for your entire life and still not fully grasp everything it represents for us.
Yet the new Christian who knows his sins is forgiven is at a fantastically beautiful place.
Yes, that's right, for sure. Yep.
I knew I was saved because the pastor at the front, when I got taken to church, and the first day they asked me, "Are you free?" And I said, "No." So I wasn't. And I went back tonight because they had something and I wanted it. The last night the preacher said, "Someone's having a burden lifted off him." This was right at the end of the service. That's me. I'm free. And I went...
You sensed it.
I said it. And maybe a bit before your time, The Who.
Oh, I know of them. Yeah, I never saw them. But the big band, yep.
They had opera Tommy, and it was the song, I'm free, and freedom tastes of reality. I went home singing that.
Oh, beautiful. So there's a genuine transformative encounter with God's Spirit that has done something in your life. And that's... You can't reason that away. You're just what you just described to me. There wasn't theology. Interestingly, it was experience, and you probably to some degree limit that experience by trying to compartmentalize it into a theological perspective. It's not that we shouldn't try to have theology behind it, but God's relational. Enjoy the experience of it.
I have to be careful not to base my theology on that on that experience.
Yes, but nonetheless, you can. It's not to dismiss the experience.
But the thing is, I wasn't saved, and suddenly, I knew I was saved. And it's not like people get told. You hear cases where people get told they're saved because of those things.
You knew.
No one told me I was saved. I knew I was saved, and then I went through the process of learning about what saved means. Yeah.
That's right, and that's. I mean, the classic example of that is Jesus in John's Gospel heals the man born blind, and he says, "Well, I don't know much about what you're saying, but one thing I do know is I was blind and now I can see." That was his experience. He goes, whether he's the Messiah or not, that's beyond me. All I know is this is where I was, this is where I am now. Yeah. And that was experiential. And it's not wrong. We can't overly intellectualize everything. Allow experience as long as we undergird it with theology.
And the other thing he says, if he wasn't from God, how could
That's
he
what it was. He lectures them a bit.
Yeah, and see, Jesus did those things to prove he was God.
That's right. Exactly.
Not okay, he healed the guy, but the underlying reason was to show people, I actually am God, guys.
That's correct.
And so what I can say, you better believe it. Yeah,
that's exactly right, for sure.
Anyway, we come to another little...
we're up to the burial, are we?
No, we're up to Simon bearing the cross. There's no little thing.
Oh, yeah.
Why is this in here? I don't know.
It
just says Simon of
Cyrene.
And
they Africa.
And they reckon Rufus was his son or something like that.
Yes, so scholars believe because in Rufus in the book of Acts. Yeah, so that may be why it's in here, because he's probably well known.
Okay.
It would indicate, I think church history, don't ask me where it comes from, but somewhere along the way, I think there's evidence, maybe in Irenaeus or one of the early church fathers, that says that somewhere along the line, Simon became a believer, and that Acts seems to indicate that his son Rufus was also well known in the church, which would make perfect sense to me, that this guy who carried the cross could well have ended up becoming a well-known believer in the early church.
Well, again, people would have seen that he'd done it, and then when after Jesus resurrected, that they sort of relate these things.
The story. Yep.
I don't cry, but I was watching. What was it?
I do.
Wasn't the robe? Was it the robe? Might have been the robe. One of those. No. Spartacus. In Spartacus, there's a crucifixion at the end, and Spartacus gets out. But at one point, Jesus falls down and he looks into the camera.
Oh, okay.
I believe. I was watching it one night. At that point, I actually cried.
Oh, yeah.
Because I cry once a decade. But just being touched by a little thing like that, and because we come after that straight away of the daughters of Jerusalem weeping for Jesus is going. He's saying, "Look, hang on, guys. I can't not go through this. You don't know what it's going to mean at the other side.
There's a greater purpose for this. Absolutely. Yep, that's right. He was determined to do it.
That's a lot in our lives, I think, too, if we go through things. I mean, we had the couple who spoke the testimony before mine.
Yes.
Who've been going through stuff, which made me a bit worried about doing mine. Yeah. But again, they're going through that stuff for a reason. Yeah. We don't know what it is. No. And I couldn't sit down with them and say, you're going through this for a reason.
Oh, no, because it's beyond us.
Yeah.
But we can say we believe that all things will work together for good, and we do believe God is working in those situations.
The same with Jesus here, who's going through this thing for a reason, and he's going to work it out.
That's right. Yep.
And there's 2 criminals crucified with him, as we know about, and one of them we meet in a second. But again, the first thing Jesus says, Father, forgive them. How difficult that would be for us.
Oh, totally. Without the grace of God, I don't think it's possible. I mean, Stephen pretty much echoed those words as he was being stoned to death as the first martyr. Father, forgive them. I don't think it's possible for us to truly experience forgiveness for those things that have been done to us without the help of the Holy Spirit.
I get cranky at people going slow in front of me on the expressway.
Yeah, me too. and it's hard, but we feel like when we're hurt, when we're misunderstood, when we're trying to do the right thing and we come up short, or we're accused of coming up short, it's very hard. But with Christ's help, we can forgive. And forgiveness isn't letting them people off the hook. Forgiveness is just handing that right to judge over to the true righteous judge.
Yep. And it lets it go for you.
That's right.
Because if you hold it in, it
eats us up.
It eats us
That's
up.
right.
Yeah,
exactly. You got it.
And of course they said, "Oh, he saved others. Why can't he save himself?" Because
mocking him again.
Yes. But John Wayne comes along and says, "This is the King of Kings," doesn't he? One of the movies.
John Wayne.
Surely this is the King of Kings.
Surely this is the King of Kings.
But again, it's and again they put that sign and intentionally mocking the Jews on him, saying he's this Jesus, King of the Jews, in 3 languages.
Yep, that's right. It was there very clearly.
Yeah, just to mock the Pharisees and the religious leaders, saying this is your king.
Then they say, take it. Don't say he was the King of the Jews. Say he claimed to be the King of the Jews, and the Pilate's just he's had enough by this point. He's going, no, I crucified him, but I'm going to say this. Yep,
he's your king. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Which must
have really ticked off the Pharisees and religious crowds.
Oh yes.
Well, the Sadducees probably more so than the Pharisees. But
again, all these little under things that are in there, little things.
Just dig a little bit. There's some good gold in there.
Yeah. And we have the story of the thief who gets saved. And that's only in Luke. And
that's in Luke's gospel, yep.
People go into lots of things about this. And
yeah, well, we don't know anything. I mean, Matthew's gospel talks about it, doesn't say anything about him repenting. I just think Luke's trying, regardless of what the story is, the point Luke's trying to make is that even on your deathbed, even though you've lived a wicked life, there's still space for you in God's kingdom. I think that's the point. Luke has written in that to show us that it's never too late. While there's breath in your lungs, it's never too late. Yeah. Even if those breaths are through strained crucifixion, it's never too late.
It's just the next bit where Jesus says, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." He finally gets to the point where he dies and he gives it up. And there's lots of people watching him from a distance and stuff like that. Is it on the cross for 6 hours? Because imagine
that's short.
Imagine being his mother, though.
Oh.
I mean,
horrific.
Well, and his close friends and stuff like that, seeing him hanging there, and Australia's going, and there's nothing you can do.
No.
And you had all the other people around mock him and stuff like that, but they did not realise what they were going to know
3 days later.
3 days later, yep.
Yeah, that's right.
So we come to the burial, and it appears what they do is similar to what they do in some European countries now where they haven't got any room.
Yep.
They'd lay them out and let the body rot and then pack the...
Correct.
So
they would have a family ossuary, which is a clay box, generally speaking. The rich people did this. The more wealthy ones would have a clay ossuary, and they would, when it says gathered to their fathers, that's what the context was. That they would, like you say, lay the body out, put it in the tomb, wait a year or two, and the body would decompose. Then they would gather the bones and put them in the box along with the rest of the family's bones. That was the principle.
In Malta, if you haven't got a family grave, you get put in a common grave, and once you've they put your bones in a common place.
Okay.
And so one year the politician promised if they got in, they'd make sure everyone had a gravesite, every family had a gravesite.
Okay, that was something they did.
Which they promised again the next year.
Of course they did.
But again, one at the cemetery realised there was a bit of space between 2 family plots, so he sold it to a family.
So he sold it to a family member.
But again, that's perfectly normal for them to say, okay, I'm going to go in there. And I've seen lists of something like 30 names.
Yeah, they wouldn't. Yeah, that's right. They probably, if space is a premium, would understand that. We don't really have a space problem to that degree in Australia, so it would have been a common problem in some parts of the world.
Yeah, we get upset about it, but
yeah.
But we won't go there. We don't want to go into death things.
No. Yeah.
Because we've got chapter 24 to go.
We've got 24 to go after Jesus has
we haven't got 24 to go. We've got 24 to go.
We've got 1 to go. 1 to go, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And you can also find us on all the socials. Just search The Bible. Wait, what? And to find out more about our church, just search C3 Camden, C3 Picton, or C3 Thirroul on the web or on the socials. Thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you on the next episode of The Bible. Wait, what?